Chapter 1. Mikhail didn't like flying. It wasn't exactly fear, but he had to overcome a heightened sense of alertness whenever he experienced the shuttle's takeoff run down the runway. A strange, rare aversion, especially in an era of mass space travel, which had become as commonplace as a drone delivering pizza to a high-rise window. Speaking of pizza, Mikhail caught himself staring at the colorful sign of an automated cafeteria for several minutes. The advertisement boasted a wide slice of thin dough, loaded with salami like a barge with timber draped with golden strands of melted cheese. "Only 199 rubles," the equally flashy text exclaimed, pushing the misleading notion that you should spend money not because it's delicious, but because it's cheap. The machine sensed the presence of a potential but hesitant buyer and puffed out the spicy aroma of smoked sausage baked on fresh dough. Mikhail swallowed hard and rummaged through his pockets for cash. His bank card was empty, and he had no desire to glance at the accusatory zero balance again. 2 crumpled bills sparked a faint hope, and as it turned out, not in vain. The machine reluctantly accepted the notes on the second try and prompted him to enter his phone number to transfer the change, then froze, awaiting a response. "Damn it!" Mikhail, exasperated, slapped the vandal-proof display with his palm. Something clicked inside the machine. The text vanished and a new message appeared. "Thank you for donating to the Nature Conservation Fund." Mikhail wanted to howl in frustration, but his hunger-sharpened hearing caught a sound from the metal compartment under a bold red arrow. It pointed straight down, like the finger of a patrician demanding the finishing blow for a defeated gladiator. Wrapped in greasy paper was something that only vaguely resembled the advertisement. On a narrow triangle of dough sat 2 translucent red circles slathered with something yellow that smelled of sour milk. There were also 2 slices of unadvertised cucumber, but their wilted appearance did little to salvage the dish's culinary disaster. The thin dough was the only thing that matched the picture. Mikhail sighed and turned the pizza in his hands, trying to reconcile himself with the idea that it was edible. He was about to take a bite when out of the corner of his eye he noticed a young couple, a guy in a colorful shirt and a girl in an equally bright dress, watching him with scornful, mocking smiles on their thoughtless faces. He could have turned away and quietly eaten the sorry excuse for a sandwich, or walked past them nonchalantly, taking small bites. But Mikhail did something unexpected, even for himself. He threw the pizza into a nearby trash bin. What prompted such an action was hard to explain, even to himself. Perhaps it was the indescribable look in the couple's eyes as he proudly strode past them. 100 meters later, he regretted tossing the slice. Another 100 meters and he was ready to turn back, only held back by the remnants of his dignity, reinforced by an intrusive ad on an electronic panel he nearly bumped into. Stern men in spacesuits on the screen extended a hand, inviting him to join the grueling routine of space shift workers. Then, in fine print, the name of the company flashed by with a license number, followed by even smaller text listing state registration details, bank account numbers, and other bureaucratic nonsense mandated for display, though for whom was unclear. If there was one area where the country excelled, it was advertising. It was probably the only industry that thrived regardless of economic conditions. It rode the waves of production cycles, and while some companies sank into the abyss of crises, advertising managed to leap onto those temporarily lifted upward. Mikhail, like most citizens, had long learned to filter out the endless spam pouring from TV broadcasts, electronic billboards, and screens installed even in public restrooms. But at that moment, something clicked in his mind, connecting synapses and opening the floodgates to the information stream. It took him a moment to realize they were hiring space workers. At first, he stared hungrily at the figures on the screen, unable to believe his eyes. The numbers radiated a cosmic scale, cold and incomprehensible to an ordinary mortal. Only deputies earned more, but it was easier to fly to Alpha Centauri than to join their ranks. Mikhail desperately needed money. Just a few months ago, he had buried the person most dear to him, emerging into a life without a job or a means of survival. His wife had faded slowly, clinging to life with the vitality of youth not yet withered. Something was eating her from the inside, but unfortunately the doctors could never provide a precise diagnosis. And how could they when, according to the media, the country was reeling from one terrifying virus after another, each with a destructive impact surpassing Godzilla and King Kong combined? The government sounded alarms and issued so many directives that local authorities stopped understanding anything and decided to do nothing at all, reasoning that inaction was a sin but a mistake was a crime. No one bothered to memorize the names of the strains or the Latin letters that followed them. People lived their usual lives, grumbling about the inconveniences and restrictions brought by announcements of new diseases. For a whole year, under such conditions, Mikhail knocked on hospital doors, but doctors staunchly held their ground, turning their facilities into fortresses under the banners of viral infections. Test results are negative, they'd say after running analyses, then shut their doors, declaring entry was only for their own, those infected with the relevant virus. Clinics passed the buck to hospitals, hospitals to clinics, and in the end, Mikhail was left with prescriptions for outrageously expensive drugs and hope for nothing but a miracle. Alas, no miracle came. He had to sell the car and abandon his job to stay with his beloved in her final days. Then came a deafening loneliness, shrouding his mind in darkness. A persistent, inexplicable guilt gnawed at him, unsoothed by time or the burn of countless drinks. He couldn't return to his job due to the company's bankruptcy, and he had to scrape by with odd jobs, which slipped through his fingers like sand, spent on loan repayments and the growing demands of utility bills. And now, on the electronic screen before him, glowed the solution to all his financial woes. Salary, per diems, allowances, bonuses. Mikhail couldn't believe his eyes. This has to be a scam. A thought flared in his mind, singeing the wings of his fleeting dream. But what do I have to lose? He countered, trying to douse the flames of distrust with cold logic. They can't force me. If they don't pay, I'll walk away. No contract, no agreement. If they don't offer the promised amount, there's no deal. That's that. Confidence began to return. I'll take a walk, maybe check it out. What's the address again? Pray, Chapter 2. The Recruit. The address led to an unremarkable two-story building on the very edge of the city. Mikhail was already doubting whether a place like this could offer big money or even hand over anything at all. As long as they don't take my last pennies, he thought with a wry smile, recalling the depressing emptiness of his pockets. Shrugging, he hesitantly approached the entrance and began studying the numerous signs plastered on the walls to the left and right of the door. He expected to see something like the advertisement that had brought him here, or at the very least, a modest banner stating that contracts were being offered. Strangely, there was nothing of the sort. Moreover, it turned out that the small building housed about 10 companies with vague, non-committal names. Some had additional information that shed a bit of light. For example, below the grandiose Golden Light was a note clarifying it was a real estate agency, while Quiet Haven turned out to be a travel agency. But many names stood alone. Who could guess what a company called Prometheus did? Lighting technology, electrical work, or educational services, and Rubicon. Mikhail recalled that it was the name of a river in Italy, crossing which held significance for some ancient leader. His memory promptly reminded him that if one were to talk about crossing rivers, there was another famous one known as the Styx. What the hell is this? Mikhail pressed his temples with his fists, trying to push away thoughts of what he'd recently endured. He took several deep breaths, waiting for the pounding in his head to subside, then grabbed the curved visitor-worn handle. Behind the door stood a robotic doorman, its panel glittering with a row of buttons labeled with the same company names he'd seen outside. "I'm here for space work," Mikhail said loudly into the microphone, cursing himself for not memorizing the company name from the ad. "Please specify the company you wish to visit," the doorman droned in a hollow voice. "Why the hell are you even here if you can't give simple answers, and the office numbers are already listed at the entrance?" Mikhail thought with irritation, ready to leave, when he heard a cough from the corner. "Ahem. You, kid, need to head to Rubicon." Mikhail turned, confused, and only then noticed the peeling plaster on the walls, painted an unpleasant color, the ceiling with dangling cobwebs, and the scuffed floor with tiles worn beyond recognition. "Damn it," was all Mikhail could say. "Yeah, some office," the stranger vaguely agreed. "Maybe I should just forget this place and its job." A traitorous thought flickered in Mikhail's mind, but he thanked the old man and quickly, almost afraid he'd change his mind, pressed the button next to Rubicon. He didn't want to admit it, but beyond the money, there was another factor driving him toward the unknown. He needed to leave the city, or better yet, the planet. To escape to some distant hole, sever all ties with the society that had entangled him in its web, and start life anew. The robot handed him a plastic card with a barcode and instructed him to head to the second floor. "Room 201, the monotonous voice called after him. "Why am I so nervous? It's a perfectly modern visitor control system, convenient for landlords to charge per guest," Mikhail reassured himself as he climbed the gray concrete staircase. It was surprisingly clean compared to the building's shabby entrance. He stood before a metal door with a bright Rubicon sign and was about to scan his pass when he heard loud voices through the thin metal, followed by a heated argument. "No right. I finished my stint 5 years ago, and you're still forcing me to slave for your company. You're receiving treatment through our company's insurance. You couldn't afford it on your own. If I hadn't flown, I wouldn't need treatment." "Stop whining, Captain. If you hadn't lived, you wouldn't have to die." "That's exactly it. That reminder sums up working with you. I'm done. One last flight and that's it. Find another fool." The door flew open with such force that Mikhail barely dodged, avoiding a certain blow. A pale, bald man with a thick black beard stormed out, glared at Mikhail with bloodshot eyes, spat angrily, and stomped down the stairs, his heels clacking loudly. Mikhail stared after him, stunned, and when he turned back, he saw a woman of indeterminate age holding the door, patiently waiting for him to notice her. "Here for us?" she said in a low voice, but her tone made it clear she was the one who'd been arguing with the bald man. "I was just passing by," Mikhail mumbled, once again considering turning back. "Come in." The woman grabbed his arm and pulled him inside. "Well, spit it out. What's your problem?" she began sternly. "I'm here about the ad, actually. Space work, shift job," Mikhail said, still regretting his decision to come. "I've got enough problems without you." The woman froze, her brightly made-up eyes locked on him. Judging by her fixed stare, some mental gears were turning under her stylish hairstyle, culminating in a loud shout. "Olya!" At her call, a young woman fluttered in, looking startled and staring at Mikhail in confusion. "Deal with the guy. Got your documents?" the older woman asked. "Wait," Mikhail snapped out of it. "Work conditions, salary, responsibilities? I'm not signing anything blindly." The woman nodded understandingly and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Sit down, Olya will explain everything. We're honest, excuse the tautology, honest to God." With that, she left, leaving behind a faint scent of expensive perfume and a strange feeling of being caught in a sticky web that Mikhail had willingly stepped into. He even turned his head to check if anything had clung to his neck. He didn't get much chance to dwell on it. Olya turned out to be quite the chatterbox, capable of unloading a torrent of information in a minute, more than some could manage in half an hour. His thoughts could barely keep up with her tongue, and from her speech, Mikhail only grasped that the job involved working on the ring, a term for the belt of planets farthest from Earth, where advanced space stations were established. The work entailed operating harvesters, machines that collected a specific type of mineral that surfaced in veins. Oh, and most importantly, Olya suddenly remembered, knowledge of a foreign language is mandatory. Well, not exactly mandatory, she hesitated, but highly desirable. The station is international, and it'll be easier for you to communicate with the staff. English specialized school, fluent English plus German and a bit of French, but I don't know how to operate your harvester. Will that do? Yes, yes. Olya clapped her hands. You're a godsend. Nobody knows how to operate a harvester. On-site practical training is part of the Young Specialist program. So, are we signing up? Mikhail didn't understand why his qualifications sparked such delight. Maybe my perfect English impressed her. Guess school wasn't a waste. Pride in his education nearly overshadowed one of his main concerns. What about the signing bonus? The signing bonus, equivalent to 2 salaries, will be transferred to your card as soon as you consent to the processing of personal data and sign the employment application. You can verify the payment right here with me. The contract term is 1 Earth year, renewable if both parties agree. In addition to the salary, you'll receive per diems and allowances. Monthly and quarterly bonuses are also possible, at the discretion of management. So, what's your decision? Chapter 3. Spaceport. The interstellar ship was set to launch from a spaceport built on the foundation of a former International Space Station, long past its prime. Decommissioning it was deemed impractical, so it was repurposed into a launch platform for large ships, as lifting off from Earth would be too resource-intensive. However, it required modernization and expansion with spacious docking modules for passengers awaiting transfers. Later, repair workshops, warehouses, and a fuel storage facility, replenished automatically by unmanned drones, were added. The result was a decent base for long-range spacecraft, capable of servicing them without returning to Earth. Due to the project's international nature, the spaceport was given the neutral name Luna First, though it was more commonly called Luna Park in casual conversation. Swift shuttles ferried small groups of passengers and staff to and from the spaceport. The shuttle's interior was divided into 2 rows of 3 seats each, with a narrow aisle between them, barely wide enough for 2 passengers to pass. At the entrance, a conductor stood, blocking the aisle with her presence until the previous rows were filled. "I want a window seat," whined a hulking man, a head taller than the other passengers, in a high-pitched voice. "You'll want with your wife. Here, you sit where you're told," the pretty stewardess shot back, sparking a burst of laughter. "Oh, punish me," the man continued in a nasal tone, egged on by the others' approving chuckles. "You're already punished if you're flying on a contract." That last remark abruptly silenced the banter, causing everyone to slump and take their seats without looking up. Mikhail didn't care where he planted himself. He disliked window seats because the flashing landscape during takeoff, coupled with the accompanying jolts, stirred an unsettling sense of anxiety. It usually faded after liftoff, but why endure discomfort when it could be avoided? "Don't hold up the line." The conductor gave the daydreaming Mikhail a noticeable shove. "Your seat's in the middle, or do you also want a window?" "No, no." Mikhail hurriedly squeezed between the seats and plopped down with a thud. "Robert?" said a stocky guy already seated by the window, extending his hand. "Just Rob's fine." Mikhail, just... "Misha, you comfy there?" "Yeah. Why?" "Because you're sitting on the seatbelt buckle. Damn it, no wonder something felt off." "Everything's off here." A middle-aged man with a completely bald head and piercing deep-set eyes settled into the aisle seat. "What do you mean?" Mikhail managed to free the buckle and was now wrestling with the belt, pulling the other half out from under himself. His neighbor was more attentive, having already tossed both parts of the belt off his seat, and now watched Mikhail's struggles with a smirk. "Everything's fine is when life's like normal people's, but when you sign up to slave away for their smug existence, forget about a normal life. All you'll get is relentless toil in a place devoid of comfort and convenience. Starting right now, for instance, why do I have a feeling they won't be serving booze on this flight? Mikhail suddenly remembered the flat flask in his breast pocket, prepared for the flight. Since he'd avoided the window seat. Here, he offered the flask to his neighbor. Whoa, cognac. You sure? Well, fair enough. We'll settle up later. Name's Samvel. Just say my name. Lots of folks around here know me. Samvel's handshake was firm enough that Mikhail had to discreetly flex his hand a few times to ease the grip. His neighbor downed the flask contents in one gulp and within a minute was dozing with a blissful smile. Already drunk? The stewardess checking seatbelts stopped by Samvel. At her feet lay the empty plastic flask. She nudged it with her foot and looked up, fixing a stern gaze on Mikhail. Whose container? Mikhail felt awkward and a bit flustered. Rob seized the moment. What container? Rob feigned concern, peeking out from behind Mikhail. The stewardess bent down to pick up the offending item, but it was gone. She quickly straightened and scanned the area. The surrounding faces displayed only calm and serenity. One broke from its nirvana to philosophize. Little bird, what's your deal? The guys buckled up, right? Buckled, so fly along. With her head held high, the uniformed woman marched on, no longer stopping to check every seatbelt. Samvel's no ordinary guy. Not only do plenty know him, but they respect him too, Rob explained, reclining more comfortably in his seat. So, tell me, what force dragged you onto these galleys? Why galleys? Because the work ahead is grueling. Trust me, I slaved 5 years on Jupiter as just a technician. I know what it's like. 5 years of my life gone. Now I want to start over, with big money. You? Same here. I worked at a firm installing and configuring security systems. Pay wasn't great, but it was steady and I was up for a promotion. Then everything went sideways. I dropped out of life too, though only for a year. The firm shut down, jobs dried up, and I'm drowning in debt. So like you, I'm starting fresh. Mikhail didn't like the spaceport. It resembled an iron cage, assembled as if by Eiffel, who was known not only for his famous tower but also for other all-metal marvels like train stations. But those were modernism. This was a pitiful imitation, rivaling only the city jail in its abundance of metal. Another unpleasant feature was the lack of gravity. Sure, expending energy on transit passengers was costly, but damn it, what were citizens' taxes for if not to create a comfortable environment? Mikhail cursed again when, unaccustomed to the conditions, he bumped his head on a high threshold, and then several more times while trying to push through to the waiting area. Passengers suddenly transformed into helium-filled figures, aimlessly floated from wall to wall, colliding and bickering. Realizing he wouldn't make it through without bruises or frayed nerves, Mikhail grabbed a handle on the wall and decided to wait until the main crowd filtered out. He felt someone tug his sleeve. Rob was floating nearby, nodding towards something off to the side. Judging by his ease in this chaos, weightlessness was no issue for him. You picked the wrong direction, brother, Rob grinned. The bar's that way. There's a bar here? This is civilization, brother, Rob laughed. The pinnacle, literally and figuratively. Nice line, huh? Only the stars are higher. Nice one, too. What'll you do with the money? Well, Mikhail trailed off, stumped by the question for the first time. The signing bonus had barely covered his loans and utilities, with a deposit for future payments, but salaries and even bonuses lay ahead. He hadn't thought that far. I'll buy a sweet yacht, Rob said, not waiting for an answer. To sail through half-decomposed plastic garbage. I mean a space yacht. Oh. Mikhail almost mentioned the space junk cluttering Earth's orbit, but held his tongue. Rob gave him a gentle push, and they floated into a small room styled like an Earth bar. This way, Rob said, docking with the skill of a regular onto a high stool bolted to the floor in front of a long counter. Across from them, an android bartender spun a cocktail shaker in her hands, its container whirling at the speed of a weaver's spindle. Hey, beauty, 2 round Marys for me and my friend. Round, you mean bloody, Mikhail said, recalling his cocktail knowledge. Ha, you're behind the times, brother. Get used to living large. Rob slapped his shoulder and nodded toward the bar. The gleaming nickel-plated bartender deftly filled a syringe-like dispenser with vodka and sprayed it out, forming a quivering, transparent orb. Then, with another dispenser, she injected tomato juice into the orb and blew it toward Rob. The gelatinous round mass floated majestically, its sides shimmering. Rob pulled out 2 straws and handed one to Mikhail. "Go for it!" Mikhail pierced the orb with his straw, but instead of flowing through the hole, the vodka ran outside the straw and hit him in the nose, making him cough. "Wetting effect," Rob laughed. "Learn." He twirled the end of his straw, swiftly pierced the orb, and sucked down a third of the vodka and tomato juice. "Rub the tip of the straw in your hands," he advised. "The grease on your fingers is enough to keep that pesky effect at bay." "Contract workers for the ring, assemble at Gate 1, a melodic female voice sang out. "Whoa, that's us!" Rob perked up. "Finish up and let's grab our spots before we're stuck at the back." They didn't make it to their spots. At the exit to the spacecraft, partially obscured by a small platform, stood a bald man with a thick beard who looked vaguely familiar to Mikhail. He was haughtily surveying the crowd gathering before him. "Oh, that's the captain who was arguing at the company I signed with," Mikhail recalled. "Last flight and all that. I'm Roman Polikarpov, captain of the long-range spacecraft Ajax," the man announced loudly once he deemed enough people had gathered. "We'll be spending the near future together, so take note of a few simple rules to reach our destination without incident. Address me as Captain, sir. Follow the crew's orders without question and behave calmly, keeping your aggressive attitudes in check. If that's clear, proceed to the exit. No crowding or pushing if that's not too much to ask." "Who are all these people?" Mikhail asked, surprised, as he scanned the roughly 100-strong crowd shuffling unevenly toward the gate. No, it wasn't their number that struck him as odd. It was their appearance, more akin to down-and-out vagrants who'd hit rock bottom, living for nothing but petty theft. "We know who," Rob drawled lazily. "Ex-cons, who else? Don't worry, in flight we'll only brush up against the sides of their hibernation pods." Chapter 4. Awakening. Mikhail's awakening was brutal. How could it be otherwise when your blood had been drained from your veins and replaced with a freeze-resistant fluid, your organs set to an energy-saving mode, your consciousness and perception of the outside world switched off? Calling it an awakening was generous. It was more like surfacing from oblivion. Mikhail emerged from an inky darkness, blinded by harsh light, gasping for air with his mouth open like a fish flung from the depths onto dry land. Each breath was a struggle, forcing his lungs to accept air they'd forgotten how to process. A few breathing exercises exhausted him so much that he slipped back into a light daze, though he continued to observe his surroundings as if hovering beside his own body. The world felt distant, steeped in deep apathy, as did his own body. The needle sigh into his vein, the mask on his face, it was as if it wasn't happening to him, met with utter indifference. The only thing that brought a flicker of joy was the word rehabilitation on the overhead monitor. Not for its meaning, which eluded him along with most of the letters his mind couldn't grasp, but for the bright colors of the LED lights blinking along the edges. The mask helped him breathe, and for the first time Mikhail felt irritation when it was replaced by a thick tube that snaked down his throat. He tried to grumble, but all that came out was a faint moan. The warm liquid that flowed directly into his stomach reconciled him to the discomfort and lulled him into his first proper sleep since emerging from hibernation. "Look at that. This one's come to," a voice pierced his sleep. "Lucky guy," another responded. "Depends on how you look at it." A stifled chuckle followed, then silence. Mikhail opened his eyes and tried to sit up, but his strength failed him. He was swept back into unconsciousness, this time glittering with a mosaic of fragmented memories. Thankfully, it was brief. Any longer, and the chaotic flood of information might have driven him mad. He came to and lay still for a long time, staring into the void ahead. Only when the churned memories settled did his mind clear, ready to take in new information. Mikhail stretched and managed not only to sit up, but to perch on the edge of his bed. As he'd guessed, it was a hibernation pod, its translucent plastic lid flung open like a clamshell. To his left and right stretched rows of identical pods, barely discernible in the dim glow of faint lights. They were all open except for a few nearby. No wonder no one's here to greet me. Looks like I'm running late and they're probably waiting for me in some general assembly hall. At least I won't be the last to show up, Mikhail thought, lowering his feet to the floor and shivering at the cold metal. He stood without difficulty, his body feeling an unusual lightness, convenient for muscles that had lost their tone. Some degree of gravity suggested the ship was still accelerating, not idling at its destination. So we're approaching, Mikhail concluded, fruitlessly searching for clothes. The question isn't that, it's that I have nothing to wear. How am I supposed to show up in front of people? Where's my stuff, I'm asking? With no clothes in sight, he yanked the sheet from the pod and wrapped it around himself like a Roman toga. Now he just needed to figure out the right direction and head for the exit. The soft light from the ceiling didn't strain his eyes but made it hard to see far. Fortunately, the door between compartments was marked by a neat row of glowing buttons next to the lock. Mikhail took his first step in the right direction when curiosity got the better of him, turning him toward the still-sealed pods. Maybe I'll find some clothes, he justified to himself, though even from here it was clear the area around them was bare. In truth, more than clothes, he was unsettled by his own appearance. What did he look like now? Had he changed much? How could he find out without a single mirror? Behind those plastic lids, someone lay in the same state he'd once been in. Here's my chance to see what kind of reaction to expect from a guy risen from the grave. Mikhail tiptoed the last few meters, as if afraid to disturb the sleeper inside. Pressing his face to the cloudy plastic for a better look, he recoiled when he realized what he saw. He stood frozen, collecting himself, then decided it must have been a trick of the mind and looked again. This time he approached cautiously, peering from a distance before pressing his face to the plastic, now knowing what was there. Through the murky haze, a corpse stared back at him, or rather it didn't stare. It mesmerized with wide-open empty eye sockets. The black voids gripped his attention, consuming it entirely. In his peripheral vision, he could make out shriveled, darkened skin, sunken cheeks, and the dry remnants of thinning, disheveled hair. Mikhail shuddered and glanced around. He imagined others like this one creeping up behind him from the pod-turned tomb. The thought terrified him more than the corpse's empty gaze. A chill ran down his spine and he wrapped the sheet tighter, feeling a growing shiver. That can't be right, he tried to reassure himself, hurrying toward the next pod. He desperately wanted to look inside to quell the fear rising from the depths of his soul. Without hesitation, he pressed his face to the plastic, then straightened, his face frozen in horror. The second pod held another corpse, identical except for the hair color. No need to double-check. He'd seen it clearly this time, and the first pod had prepared him for what might be here. Maybe I looked like these poor bastards myself, and this is the normal physical state during hibernation. No wonder there are no mirrors here. We'd die of fright from our own faces. The thought calmed him slightly, but a nagging inner voice insisted something was wrong. Mikhail touched his face, and despite sunken cheeks and deep forehead wrinkles, he couldn't equate himself with those who'd never wake. Countless small signs, not to mention the empty eye sockets, confirmed that fact. He had no desire to check the third pod, but he reasoned that one more corpse wouldn't change anything. Hibernation likely had adverse effects, and those two hadn't survived the strain on their bodies due to individual physical quirks. Naturally, such risks weren't advertised, or he'd have been warned during the interview. Yeah, right, Mikhail scoffed bitterly. They didn't even insure me, and I didn't think twice about it. For some reason, Rob came to mind. Mikhail pondered his fate, not noticing he'd reached the next pod. He peered into it indifferently, braced for what he'd see. But reality struck again, making him stagger back and glance around in panic. The pod was empty of a body but filled with human limbs, tossed in chaotically and packed so tightly they pressed against the lid. Mikhail stood in shock, unable to process it. When his ability to think clearly returned, he realized he was utterly exhausted. His brain was shutting down from the overload of horrifying information. More than anything, he wanted to hide from the world behind the thin shell of his abandoned pod and forget everything, reclaiming the peace of mind he'd felt just 10 minutes ago. He dragged himself back to his cradle, climbed over the edge, and passed out, sinking into a deep but restless dream. In it, a maniac chased him, brandishing a butcher's knife. Mikhail had to dodge and run constantly. The pursuer stuck to him like glue, and Mikhail even felt hot breath on his neck. In desperation, he pushed off hard to leap away, only to plummet into a pit that opened before him. The impact was jarring and painful. Mikhail woke on the floor, drenched in sweat, tangled in the crumpled sheet. The cold metal beneath him quickly brought back awareness of where he was and why. He sat up, wrapping himself in the damp sheet, and glanced around cautiously. The 3 ominous pods were still there, their matte lids glinting in the dim light. He sat and thought. If the contents of the first 2 pods could be explained somehow, the third was beyond comprehension. Something sinister was happening on this ship, and the question of what to do loomed large. A sense of danger made him tense. Leaning on the pod's edge, he stood. The sheet kept slipping, and he couldn't secure it properly, which looked absurd and drew laughter from 2 scruffy men in worn jumpsuits who appeared out of nowhere. "Calm down, you won't need it," one said, chuckling. "Yeah, you're fine as is," the other added. "Come on, they're waiting for you." "Me? Who?" Mikhail froze at the abrupt greeting. Something about the pair unsettled him. They looked like Australian Aborigines who'd donned the uniforms of crashed pilots. Behind their jovial demeanor lurked something else, and it put Mikhail on edge. "Listen, Mikey, he's still asking who," one said. "No, wait, he's still asking." "Easy, Shaggy, the guy's just not recovered from hyperaction." "Hibernation?" Mikhail corrected automatically. "Yeah, that's the one. Let's go, there's clothes, shoes, food. You hungry?" Mikhail noticed Shaggy's Adam's apple bob as he swallowed hard at the mention of food. Before he could respond, the pair, without a word, grabbed him under the arms and dragged him toward the exit. Resistance was futile. His muscles hadn't regained full strength, and his body was still recovering from prolonged stasis. All he could do was shuffle his feet and pray they didn't break his arms, which they gripped like vices. Mikhail had correctly guessed the door's location, but it brought him no joy now. In the company of these strangers, he felt like a prisoner whose fate depended entirely on their whims. Beyond the door was a corridor with branching paths. They turned into the first one, darker and narrower than the rest. "Where are we going?" He tried to engage his escorts. "Where you need to," one snapped, while the other stayed silent. "Seriously, where?" a voice called from behind. The words, if not frightening, made them visibly nervous. They shoved Mikhail behind them and turned, standing shoulder to shoulder. "None of your business, Rob." Hearing the familiar name, Mikhail peeked out and saw his old acquaintance. "Hey," he said, relieved. "Look who it is, Mikey and Shaggy, the acrobatic brothers. Everyone thought they were siblings, but turns out they're rats." "We're not brothers." "Then cousins. So what's with the rat business?" "Why do you care about this punk?" "I'm looking out for the common good, Mikey, and you two, I see, have a problem." The dim corridor obscured details, but the glint of steel in Shaggy's hand was unmistakable. "He's got a knife," Mikhail shouted, instinctively grabbing the arm. Shaggy twisted free from the weak grip and stabbed Mikhail in the chest. "What problem?" he sneered. "No person, no problem." A sharp pain pierced Mikhail's lungs. He tried to breathe but coughed, spitting blood. His vision blurred, his legs buckled, and he collapsed onto the cold floor. Chapter 5. Rob Mikhail didn't fully lose consciousness, but a strange sensation took hold, as if he were watching everything happen from a distance, detached from his body sprawled on the floor. Shaggy's downfall was his love for dramatic words and poses. He couldn't recall where he'd heard the phrase starting with, If there's a person, there's a problem. But tacking on its ending seemed like a clever move. Unfortunately for him, it brought no luck. Rob's swift lunge cut off both his speech and his thoughts. Shaggy crumpled, mouth still open. Favored by the gods open, eyes vacant and unseeing, he wasn't the only one with a knife. Mikey flinched, deciding it was wiser not to tempt fate, and bolted down the corridor, vanishing around the nearest corner. The sound of his footsteps hadn't yet faded when Rob hoisted Mikhail onto his shoulder and carried him toward a room marked with a red cross on the door. Mikhail wanted to help, but his limbs felt foreign, dangling like a puppet with cut strings. Rob hauled him into the medical bay and dumped him onto a cot. "You're heavy, brother. If gravity wasn't half strength, I wouldn't have made it." He inserted a needle into Mikhail's vein, attached to a silicone tube trailing from a machine with colorful blinking lights, and selected severe chest trauma on a small monitor. "Ship's infirmary will get you back on your feet faster," Rob explained. "Trust this tech marvel, it'll do the job right." The machine looming over Mikhail hummed, wrapping him in a tangle of tendrils and setting to work with manipulators, treating the wound. Mikhail lay still, savoring the pleasant warmth spreading through his body, and didn't notice when he slipped into a deep sleep. This time, waking was calmer. A persistent hand shaking his shoulder pulled him from the depths of sleep. "Wake up, damn it!" Mikhail twitched, reluctant to part with the soothing calm enveloping him. The bed beneath him bore no resemblance to his former pod, that much he remembered clearly. Then vague images of certain figures began surfacing in his memory. A twinge of unease forced his eyes open. A vaguely familiar face hovered above him, but up close he couldn't place it. "It's me, Rob. Can you stand?" "Where am I?" Mikhail whispered. "Still in space, damn it. Flying with slight acceleration so gravity's light and walking's easier. Try to follow what I'm about to say. There was an accident during the flight. Probably a meteorite, but no one knows for sure. The collision messed up the ship's electronics, forcing some people out of hibernation early." "How early?" "Way early," Rob coughed. "That's not the point. Half the passengers died, so you got lucky. Maybe. I don't get it. And the other half is surviving off the first." "What? You mean—" "No, that can't be." Mikhail now recalled the hibernation pods, then Shaggy, Mikey, the knife strike. He anxiously felt his chest, immediately finding a fresh scar that twinged with faint pain. "Oh, it sure can. Exactly what you're thinking. How else were the rest supposed to survive when they'd eaten everything, edible or not, when hunger had their stomachs glued to their spines? Notice the crowd around here? Not exactly weighed down by morals. Slitting a throat's as easy as shaving for them. Know what bull means in their slang?" "Don't know, don't want to know. But how'd you end up with this lot?" "Truth is, I never really left them. Tried to, signing that contract, and look where it got me." Rob sighed heavily. "Guess it's my fate to die a thief. But it's not over yet. I believe I can still make it." "And me?" "Well, it's rough, but not hopeless. I just fed Samvel a story. You met him briefly, by the way. Nasty guy, but he's in charge here. Told him you're a hotshot security systems specialist. So for now, they won't touch you. After that, it's up to how the cards fall." Rob didn't entirely believe a security specialist would be useful aboard the Ajax, so he quickly shifted focus to a bundle of clothes he'd brought. "By the way here, this is for you." He handed over a small package containing a lightweight jumpsuit emblazoned with the employer's logos and soft rubber-soled boots. "One thing I don't get," Mikhail said, struggling with a stubborn pant leg. "They're offering big money, but the only ones signing up are jailbirds and riffraff. How's that possible?" "What's strange about it?" Rob asked, surprised. "Out of every 10 contractors, maybe one comes back, if that. So the only ones taking this gig are those desperate or fresh out of prison." "Well, damn, no wonder that office seemed shady. What happens to the rest?" "The company spins tales about how they stay to work on the ring for life. Open spaces, clean air, simple relationships, a chance to show grit, true friendship, all that nonsense. But in reality, half don't even make it to the sites. Many didn't die from a meteorite but from failing to wake up properly. Hibernation's like Russian roulette, except the cylinder's half-loaded, not just one bullet. The company offered you everything but life insurance, right? Because no fool would invest in a losing deal. Mikhail zipped up the jumpsuit, slipped his feet into the soft boots, and fastened the Velcro. So, let me get this straight. I'm on a ship taken over by ex-cons surviving by eating each other, and two of them nearly made me their snack to avoid sharing. Look on the bright side. You survived hibernation and that run-in with those two. Seems that's the only luck I've got. What's the point of living if my future's just being dinner for some psychos? Wouldn't a knife to the heart be better than waiting for death? Maybe if everything was set in stone, but that's the thing. Life's a drama with a non-linear plot, and not even God can predict its twists. So wipe your nose and march forward, into the fire. Where to? Didn't I mention, Samvel wants to see you. Chapter 6, Ganymede. Samvel lounged in the captain's chair at the center of a small hall, its walls aglow with numerous monitors. The screens danced with graphs, scrolling lines detailing the ship's internal processes, plotting potential routes to the destination, and displaying data on the engine, life support systems, and live feeds of space from multi-directional cameras. The captain and a couple of crew members, their bandages soaked with blood, sat before the largest monitor, hands resting on panels lined with switches and colorful buttons. Along the walls, sprawled on the floor, several of Samvel's lackeys played a game with homemade cards. Mikhail surveyed the scene and concluded his chances of survival were near zero with this crowd. The remnants of the crew, captain and assistants, were clearly valuable. The cons would only touch them as a last resort. So, who was the prime candidate for slaughter? Know why you're still alive? Samvel began. Probably because I'm needed. Ha ha ha, needed. You hear that? The card players looked up, intrigued by what had amused their leader. If you were needed, they'd be finishing you off by now, but until we deal with Shaggy, you live. Ha ha, until you're needed. Several screens flickered, switching to display a small glowing dot. Columns of colored numbers scrolled across them, accompanied by an urgent alarm. What's that squealing? Samvel wrinkled his nose in annoyance. Hey, Grim, nudge the captain. A bald giant nearly 2 meters tall with a menacing glare from under heavy brows, tensed but didn't need to act. The alert system chimed in. Unidentified ship directly ahead, initiating evasive maneuver. Yeah, do it. Samvel nodded, then mused. Who are they? Pirates, maybe? Should we steer clear? Captain, what do your scanners say? Distance is still too great. Could it be a ghost ship? Grimm's face lit up, and Mikhail could have sworn he gazed at the monitors with almost childlike wonder. Mikhail decided to play along. A ghost ship, probably depressurized, crew dead, drifting aimlessly in space, he blurted. I read about that. For us, it's far from aimless. You're going to scout it, Samvel chuckled. Captain, slow this bucket down. We need to chat with the dead. You heard him? Grimm hissed menacingly. All right, I'll do it, the captain groaned. The card players abandoned their game and crowded around the screens. Why do we need this, boss? Poking around among corpses, not exactly thrilling. Shut your traps, Samvel roared. You think you're the ones going? This guy, he jabbed a finger at Mikhail, is going. And to keep it fun, we'll send Mikey with him. They'll both be damn motivated to find and haul out all the food. How long's that stuff been sitting there? Probably all rotten. A half-naked man, his body blue with tattoos, drawled. Rotten? It's a perfect freezer out there. How many degrees below zero, Captain? -150. See, Mallet, you're panicking for nothing, but it's your call. No one's forcing you to eat. What? I'm in, boss. That's right. Take these two space looters and get them suited up. Captain, what's the deal with our Flying Dutchman? The captain adjusted some dials and the screens displayed the silhouette of a large ship. A dark gash on its side revealed a massive hull breach. Ship identified. It's the Ganymede, a twin of our Ajax. Went missing over a year ago. Looks like we got lucky with our meteorite. To transport supplies, a simple mechanism was devised. A thin cable would connect the ships via a pulley, which needed to be delivered to the Ganymede and spot-welded to its hull. Then food bags could be sent between ships like a cable car. A detached hibernation pod lid, with ropes threaded through drilled holes, was repurposed as a cargo sled. The toughest part was reaching the breach on the Ganymede. Flying to it in a spacesuit with a jetpack was no small feat, and success hinged on precise control, something none of the surviving Ajax passengers had experience with. So Mikhail was the first to step into open space. "You've got 30 minutes, 40 max. Don't hook onto the other ship in time, and you're on your own, floating like frozen meat," Mallet said with mock sweetness. "How do I steer this thing?" Mikhail tried to stall. "You'll figure it out." With that, the airlock door closed, and seconds later he was ejected with a safety tether trailing behind. After fiddling with the joystick, he finally grasped how the microthrusters responded to the small, awkward handle, nearly impossible to grip in thick gloves. It was clear the spacesuit and controls were designed by different teams with no clue about each other's work. The realization hit when the projects were combined, but it was too late to change anything. They just left it as is. "No complaints from the testers," the manufacturers told space agency reps when doubts were raised. The joystick's sensitivity was another issue, often reacting to accidental bumps from the bulky suit. This sent Mikhail veering in all directions, heightening his stress and shrinking his chances of hitting the Ganymede's breach as fuel burned away. He raised his arms to calm himself. He was slowly spinning near the Ajax, threatening to tangle the tether around its hull. To avoid accidental joystick nudges, Mikhail tried pressing it with his elbow. Gently nudging the handle, he managed to stabilize his position and then slowly propel himself toward the target. The first attempt was so successful that he could have done nothing more if time weren't tight. Halfway there, he tried to repeat the move to gain speed, but the tricky joystick tilted at the wrong angle and the Ganymede dipped downward, revealing a panorama of cold stars. Luckily, the breach wasn't too far. His suit struck its edge, the heavy boots tipped him, and he was pulled inside feet first. Exhaling, Mikhail calmed down and looked around. His flashlight beam illuminated bare walls and a jagged tear filled with impenetrable darkness. Keeping one eye on it, he signaled the Ajax. A minute later, he saw his partner approaching, gripping the safety tether. Mikey moved with practiced ease. He swiftly welded a pulley to the floor's remnants with a gas torch, strung the cable he'd brought, and soon the pod lid was ready for loading. "What are you gawking at?" Mikhail heard Mikey's angry voice through his helmet. "Planning to stand here forever? We're not coming back without food." Mikhail knew time was running out. They needed to reach the storage quickly and start loading food containers, if any remained. He remembered the ship's layout the captain had shown before their departure to the Ganymede, but a bad feeling made him hesitate. It felt like something was lurking in the breach, ready to pounce if he made a careless move. He aimed his flashlight. The beam drowned in the depths, unable to pierce the darkness thick as a smokescreen. Staring strained his eyes, making them water, and he thought he saw something blacker than the surrounding void shift inside. "Someone's in there," he said, backing away until he hit the opposite wall. "Coward and weakling," Mikey spat contemptuously, charging forward. He barely stuck his head into the darkness when a human figure tumbled out. Its frost-covered face pressed against his helmet, black eye sockets peering through the clear plastic, its dangling arms wrapping around the suit as if embracing him. For a moment, Mikey was speechless. Then words spilled out like scattered peas, fast and incoherent. He flailed, shoving the limp body away. Only after it drifted a couple of steps did he remember the gas torch in his hands. With trembling fingers, he lit it on the third try and, shouting, "Stay back," thrust it forward. "I'm not coming closer," Mikhail joked, hoping simple words would snap him out of it. But Mikey's wild glare made him back off and yell, "Get it together, idiot, no one can hear you but me." The outburst brought Mikey to his senses but also enraged him. "Why didn't you warn me?" Excuse me? Who told you there was someone in this damn hole? You're the one who called me a coward. Yeah, I did. You'd have crapped yourself if that thing fell on you. Mikey kicked the floating body in frustration. It's just a stiff frozen meat. What twig, you scared? God sent me some partner. What was once a living person now spun slowly near the wall's opening, carried there by the kick. Its face was ghastly, but Mikhail found its puffiness odd for such low temperatures. How many corpses had he seen in space? Who knew what processes occurred in them over time? Still, something else nagged at him. What made the lifeless body move? If someone pushed it, who? And if it moved on its own, was it truly dead? You 100% sure it's a corpse? He asked, without much hope of being understood. Mikey took his words as a challenge. Remembering the lit torch, he grinned vengefully and approached the body. Watch this. With that, he slashed the flame across the frost-covered jumpsuit. It was his way of avenging the fear that, despite his bravado, had spilled out in front of others. Suddenly, the fabric burst, and a jet of black liquid shot at Mikey, splattering in small and large droplets. He recoiled, instinctively shielding himself, forgetting the still-lit torch. It could have caused havoc if the black stream hadn't smothered it in a thick layer. It happened so fast that Mikhail only snapped out of it when the hapless welder tossed the tool aside and began wiping his suit. The black streaks gathered into droplets, rolling off the protective fabric as round beads. What liquid could jet out at minus 150 and fearlessly douse a torch hot enough to melt metal? Let me help. Mikhail floated closer. No need to flap your hands. Forgot why we're here? Get moving first, or you think I'm doing all the work, Mikey snapped. Time's short. If we don't pull this off, we'll end up floating like that stiff. Mikhail glanced at his wrist gauge. The oxygen reserve needle was nearing the yellow zone. In 5 minutes, it had hit red, and then... He didn't want to think about what came next, but his wits sharpened. We won't even get one container out before we run out of air. Here's what I suggest. You didn't use your safety tether, right? He said, more stating than asking. Give me the end and stay put. I'll hook up a few containers and we'll pull them out together. Then we'll ride the cable back with them. Not bad, your head's working, Mikey smirked. The prospect of not venturing into the ship-turned crypt suited him fine. But hurry, and grab the lighter ones, but more of them, got it? Take the torch, if you want. Mikhail cast a disgusted glance at the blackened tool and waved it off. 3 conflicting emotions battled within him: the unknown, the danger of suffocation, and the fear of being abandoned in space. Who knew how much Samvel valued his word? Mikhail had no desire to test it on his own skin. That fear overpowered all others. Exhaling, he pushed off from the breach's edge and floated into the ship. If the devil himself appeared now, Mikhail would ram him head first and kick him senseless. No, he'd probably just float past without a second thought. Surprisingly, nothing blocked his path or snagged him with stray limbs. The ship's compartments seemed deserted. Maybe everyone was sucked out through the breach, Mikhail reassured himself, nearing another door. The electronics were offline, which worked in his favor. The manual access system, explained by the captain the day before, was operational. For emergencies, he'd said. When power's out, doors unlock automatically, letting rescuers retrieve anyone without breaching the hull. Mikhail pressed a finger into the door's recess, found the released handle, and slid it open. He instantly understood why he hadn't encountered any of the dead crew along the way. It seemed everyone who'd tried to survive had gathered here, delaying death as long as possible. As pressure equalized, a mass of corpses drifted toward him in a tight formation. The crowd swayed, not moving their legs, but advancing evenly and in unison, like a parade. Despite his resolve, Mikhail froze. He backpedaled, flailing, darted out of the room and slammed the door shut with all his might. For a minute, he stood still, breathing heavily, listening to his pounding heart. Yes, he needed to hurry, but he decided this path was closed to him. He swept his flashlight around and picked a relatively clear corridor with less floating debris. Thin wires dangled from the walls like seaweed in stagnant water, their copper strands spread like a web. Plastic scraps, metal bits, and various sized hull fragments hung in space, obstructing movement and visibility. What Mikhail saw bore the marks of deformation, likely from an internal explosion rather than an external meteorite strike. Though who's to say the two weren't connected? He pushed off hard from the handrails by the door and hurried down the corridor, guiding himself along the wall. This time, luck was on his side. The explosion had breached a bulkhead, creating a sizable hole, granting direct access to the storage area just a bit further along. There was just one problem. Another corpse, like the one that greeted them earlier, floated by the storage. "There's no one here," Mikhail mentally commanded himself, squeezing past. He nearly reached the first container when he felt something holding him back. It didn't surprise or scare him that the corpse's hand had caught his safety belt. "Fear and worry later," he repeated, prying open the icy fingers. But as he pushed the frost-covered arm aside, the corpse turned, now hypnotizing Mikhail with the black voids of its eye sockets. To his horror, he realized it was truly looking at him, its eyes completely black, and it seemed to be faintly smiling. "Begone," Mikhail said, voice trembling, pushing it away. "You're not alive, just furniture, creepy decor, nothing more. I've got bigger things to deal with." He didn't bother sorting containers, just hooked as many as the tether allowed and tugged it several times, hoping Mikey wasn't dozing at the other end. Passing the corpse again was beyond his strength. He grabbed the last container, praying Mikey had the strength to pull the whole chain.
Chapter 7. The Return. Mikhail removed his helmet and took a deep breath. The regenerated air felt like ambrosia compared to the suit's breathing mix. Only now did he notice the heaviness in his legs, realizing he'd been standing since boarding the ship. He turned to Rob, who was helping him remove the suit. "Why can I stand? Did the ship take off without us?" "No. Samville made the captain divert engine power to maintain gravity. Said we're not flying yet, so there's energy to spare." "I see." Mikhail looked around. The cargo they'd hauled from Ganymede was nowhere in sight. "Did Malevny drag the cart off?" "Yep. Hurry up. We need to make it to the split." "Hey, who's going to help me?" McKee theatrically tossed his helmet aside and stood with arms spread wide. "You'll manage. Clean your suit first. It's gross to even touch you." McKee tilted his head, inspecting his sleeves, then glanced down and noticed a blotch on his suit, like an ink stain. Frowning, he tried to wipe it off with his glove, but it clung like tar, stretching but refusing to come off. "Damn it!" McKee pulled out a knife and tried to scrape it away. His efforts were futile. The black mass flowed around the blade, returning to its place. "What the hell is this?" Frustrated, he jabbed the knife into its center. The reaction was immediate. A thin stream shot from under the blade, hitting him in the face, coating it in a black mask. The blotch's outer shell, now transparent, deflated into a thin, barely visible film. McKee staggered back, covering his face with his hands. Too late, the sticky substance crept through his nostrils, its remnants seeping into his ears. It surged inward, encasing his brain in a thin membrane. Seconds later, McKee, writhing on the floor and clawing at his face, went still, lifeless. A minute later, he stood as if nothing had happened, scanning the room with pitch-black eyes. It happened so fast that Rob and Mikhail, watching his struggle with disgust, didn't immediately grasp what had occurred. "Bro, what's wrong with you?" Rob backed away, pushing Mikhail with his shoulder. McKee picked up the dropped knife and said slowly, "Food. I'm starving." "Not enough," McKee muttered, lifting his blood-smeared face from his hand toward Rob. "You're bleeding. You okay, man?" Rob froze. "Run," Mikhail whispered, dragging Rob along. "Let's hide. Maybe in the medbay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm coming to find you," McKee laughed, advancing with arms outstretched. Rob shoved Mikhail toward the exit, and they bolted into the corridor. "He's lost it. We need to warn the others." Only for the captain. Mikhail had no desire to help the convicts who'd taken over the ship. He even entertained the thought of some cosmic retribution catching up with them, now embodied in McKee. Not from the heavens, but from space, close enough. Who was he to stand in the way of fate? Only to save the captain, Mikhail thought, panting behind Rob's broad back. McKee wasn't in a rush. He felt uneasy, stifled by the steel walls. To cool off, he craved the cold of space, where blood froze and flesh was torn by millions of icy needles. Only there lay salvation and eternal peace. He approached a steel wall and ran his palm over its matte surface. Beneath it, he sensed the pulsing rhythms of alternating current. Now, he could see far more than before. Red, yellow, and blue impulses raced in neat lines, diverging and converging in precise patterns. Their paths led to vibrant energy sources brimming with destructive power. He knew what to do. Back on Ganymede, he'd experimented with those colorful accumulators to rip open the ship's side. They called them high-voltage generators, didn't they? The result was worth it, and here he could apply that experience. What am I thinking? A sharp, anxious thought pierced McKee's mind. Did I blow up Ganymede? It was a meteorite. I only got there a couple of hours ago. Everything had already happened. It was me, his own voice echoed, as if from outside. I am the essence and the one. And, conversely, all that is one is me. This is nonsense. McKee clutched his head, feeling his mind dissolve, unable to comprehend what was happening. Your desires are primitive, and you'll get what you want. But will that make you perfect? A voice whispered in his head. Only death is perfect. Live. His throat didn't scream but rasped, turning into a groan. McKee fell to his knees, head drop into his chest. Suddenly, he saw his stepfather, who, if memory served, had died 10 years ago. Yet here he was, more alive than ever, shaking a massive fist as always. You're still useless, you animal. The best thing you can do is die so you don't poison the world. Liar! McKee lunged forward but slammed headfirst into the steel wall, collapsing with a whimper. I want to live. Your life isn't worth a damn to me. His stepfather's image morphed into Sample. One move, and no one will remember you ever existed. I'll kill you, McKee whispered through broken lips. The moment I get the chance, I'll do it. Why wait? A quiet question from nowhere rang like a bell in his head, shattering the dam of hatred that filled him to the brim. McKee rose slowly, leaving bloody smears on the wall. One eye was swollen shut, his nose twisted, dripping red onto the floor. His cheek puffed up like an abscess, and his broken mouth grinned with a jagged tooth. He drew the knife from his belt and shouted, I'll do it. Sample glanced at his watch and said irritably, Our astronauts are taking their sweet time. Gloomy. What's your take? My stomach's growling. Time to go back to the usual menu? The bald giant snapped out of a daze, staring blankly at Sample. Sample smirked and said softly, Hey, Shorak, who's losing the most at cards? Shorak was in a rough spot. After blowing 2 rounds, he had the biggest loss. Still, he answered cheerfully, The prosecutor's in deep, boss, but we're just playing. Don't worry, space is unpredictable. Malevolny's out there, and he knows his stuff. If something's up, we'll deal with him, right? The 2 convicts nearby gave vague shrugs, dodging the question. Dying in space is easy, Shorak continued. They say nothing's worse than the Black Shroud. Floats in 0G, barely visible in the dark. Once it covers you, you're gone. Even a suit won't save you. What's it do to you? Sample sneered. Shorak shrugged, but the captain answered, It takes your mind. That's what. Oh, then McKee's safe. His brains are barely there, and his mind was beaten out of him by his stepfather as a kid. Something clanged behind the door, followed by a metallic thud. The card players jumped up and backed away. The door slid open, revealing a cart piled high with containers. It rolled forward, and Malevolny stepped out proudly. Take the loot, boys! Hold it! No one touches anything without my say. Sample stood authoritatively and approached the containers, followed by tense gazes. He flipped open a lid, grabbed a chocolate bar, tore it open with his teeth, and bit off a chunk, foil and all. Here's the deal. He spat out a chewed silver piece. You'll get rations as I decide. Clear. Whether it was the sight of the coveted treat or hunger taking over, murmurs rose. Shorak mustered the courage to speak. That's not brotherly, boss. Not by the code. A goose isn't a pig's brother. I'm the law here. Let anyone who disagrees step up. Sample didn't finish. He collapsed slowly, turning halfway. The handle of a knife protruded from his back. Gloomy pushed him aside before he hit the floor and knelt before the dropped chocolate. Chocolate, he whispered reverently, scooping it up with massive hands. The word was like a starting pistol for the stunned crew. Silently but swiftly, they rushed the containers, shoving each other. Packages, colorful wrappers, briquettes, and bottles flew into the air. They'd lost their minds and didn't notice Mikhail and Rob enter. Rob assessed the scene instantly. Samvel's corpse with a knife in its back. Scattered food, some stashed by the captain and his men, and the crew rummaging through containers. Anarchy had begun. Only the strongest would survive. He kicked aside what caught his eye, then joined the others, grabbing a container. "McKee's infected," Mikhail shouted, trying to drown out the noise of tearing packages. Only Malevny paid any attention, briefly lifting his head. "Great, one less. Cap, you understand how dangerous an infection is on a ship?" Mikhail tried to reason with the captain. "Son, starvation's the real threat right now. Worse than any infection. Let's tackle problems in order. Is that the infected one?" The captain nodded toward the door, where McKee's head appeared. A second later, McKee stepped fully into view, pausing to survey the room with his one good eye. "Look, boys, McKee got stung by wasps," Shorrock chuckled, glancing up. "And his nose and cheek got smashed, and his teeth rearranged. Where'd you get so filthy, you slob?" Malevny stood in McKee's path with a grimace. McKee took a step forward. Malevny flinched, noticing the black-filled eye. "Hey, what's with you? Stay back. I'm warning you. Don't come closer." "You hear me?" he growled, trying to look menacing. His nerves gave out, and he stepped back again. Realizing threats weren't working, he fumbled for his switchblade, every proper thug's tool. But his pockets were stuffed with biscuit packs, protein tubes, and chocolate bars. His trembling hand kept slipping off the smooth plastic bulging his jumpsuit, making it hard to even stand. A silver flash, and McKee's knife sliced through the air. Malevny lost interest in his pockets. Why'd I grab so much? Can't take it to the grave, he thought, clutching his slashed throat. The laughter stopped. In the silence, the gurgling of blood was deafening. The crew froze, frantically emptying their pockets. "Gloomy, handle it," Shorrock barked. "Yeah, teach him a lesson." Gloomy didn't see Shorrock as a boss, but going against the group wasn't wise. He didn't consider McKee a real threat, and an easy win would boost his cred, especially after taking out the boss. Gloomy yanked the knife from Samvel's back, wiped it on his clothes, and sauntered toward McKee. Then it hit Mikhail. "Don't touch him. Don't even get close." Gloomy hesitated at his words, shrugged, and glanced at Shorrock. "Don't listen to that punk. Avenge our guy," Shorrock yelled. "Finish him." Gloomy swung, but McKee was faster, driving his blade under Gloomy's ribs. "Arg," Gloomy gasped, then brought his knife down, splitting McKee's skull. As he fell, he felt warm black blood splash him, but it no longer mattered. "That's not blood. You've seen it before." Mikhail elbowed the stunned Rob. "Let's get out of here." "Too late. Hold it. No one's going anywhere." It was surreal to see the figure with a knife in its head stand in the doorway, arms spread. Gloomy stirred, struggling to his knees, swaying but bracing one hand on the floor. He managed it. Wincing, he pulled the knife from his wound and raised a face twisted with rage, his eyes now black voids, like a skull's empty sockets. "Now or never," Mikhail charged. He darted past Gloomy and crept toward McKee from his blind side. "Grr," Gloomy growled, flailing his arms. Too late. McKee didn't see the threat in time and was knocked aside by Mikhail's headlong tackle. There was no time to look back or assess. Mikhail ran so fast his leg muscles turned to jelly within steps. He slowed, bending over, gasping for air. "Damn, you're strong." Rob limped up, breathing even harder. Footsteps. As if on cue, they straightened. Breath steadying. A figure with a bandaged head appeared in the corridor. Instantly, they recognized the captain. Tension melted, and Mikhail and Rob slumped, deflated. "No one else?" Mikhail nodded past the captain. "Let's wait a bit." "Here's what I'm wondering." Rob caught his breath, his mind kicking back in. "What now?" "I'm right, aren't I? We can't do anything to these black-eyed freaks. The infection in them would love to be let out. It'll just find a new host. We'll wear suits." "Good plan," Rob nodded. "And how long will that last? We can't live in them forever." "I've got a better idea." The captain shook his head. The shuttle. Where's that going to take us? Back to Ganymede?" "We're flying to Ganymede?" Mikhail's surprise stopped his heavy breathing. "Can we even fix it? And what's the point if the infection came from there?" "No," the captain shook his head. You've got it wrong. I once flew the Ganymede route, and at those coordinates, it was scheduled to swap crew at a small planet with a funny name, Bede. Rob scratched his nose, pursing his lips. So, it didn't make the swap. You sure anyone's alive there? And why didn't you tell us about an inhabited planet? We could have lived like people until rescue came. That's the problem, the captain sighed. After Ganymede vanished, the planet was struck from the inhabited registry. But there might be something left, even if the station's mothballed. And besides, Mikhail concluded, we don't have a choice.